Hello everyone. So today we will be discussing about clinical anatomy of uveal tract. So discussing the anatomy of iris, ciliary body and choroid. To make things easier, we will start with the anatomy of choroid and then everything will make sense. So the outermost layer of the choroid is the suprachoroidal lamina, this black layer that we are seeing. This is the suprachoroidal lamina. Now there is a space between the suprachoroidal lamina and the sclera, that is the suprachoroidal space, where runs the posterior ciliary artery and nerves. Okay, we'll discuss about this in another video. So the first layer is suprachoroidal layer. After this we have stroma. The stroma mainly consists of the bulk of vessels, and these vessels are arranged according to their size. The largest one, known as halar layer, is the outermost, the moderate size one known as settler layer, and the innermost the choriocapillaries, which are smallest in size. And these choriocapillaries are important because they nourish the outer part of the retina, means our retinal pigment epithelium and rods and cones. Means this is the part of retina which is not being supplied by the central retinal artery but by these choriocapillaries. This makes it important. Now we have a basal lamina of our stroma, that is the Bruch's membrane, and finally we have retinal pigment epithelium, which is separated by a small space between from Bruch's membrane. So the three layers we studied are suprachoroidal layer, the stroma, and the Bruch's membrane, and finally we have retinal pigment epithelium, that is a part of retina. Okay, so now let's make thing easy, that this suprachoroidal lamina will continue as supraciliary lamina. So the first layer of ciliary body will be supraciliary lamina, and then there will be stroma, and this stroma will consist of ciliaris muscle. The ciliaris muscle is important for accommodation and for uveoscleral outflow. We have three types of fiber in this ciliaris muscle. These are longitudinal fiber, as you may see. There are oblique fibers and there are circular fibers in this stroma of ciliary body. Now the longitudinal fiber and the oblique fiber help in the outflow of the aqueous, means uveoscleral outflow, and the circular fiber are the one which help in accommodation. The third layer in the ciliary body is the pigment epithelial layer. Okay, now this pigment epithelial layer is the continuation of retinal pigment epithelium. Mm, Due to paucity of space, this is a schematic diagram, so just try to understand. I have just drawn an arrow that retinal pigment epithelium is the one which contributes to the pigment epithelium of the choroid. Then we have a non-pigment epithelial layer, and this non-pigment epithelial layer is the one which is derived from sensory retina, means the layer which will be more inside. This will derive the non-pigment epithelium. Okay, so these were the four layers and four important layers of ciliary body: the supraciliary lamina, stroma, the pigment epithelium derived from retinal pigment epithelium, the non-pigment epithelium derived from sensory retina. Going on with iris will make things more easy. The supraciliary lamina continues forward, forming anterior limiting layer. Now this anterior limiting layer is the one which contains fibroblast and pigment cell, and this decides the color of the iris. Means if this layer is thickened, it will result in a dark iris, and if this layer is thin, there will be a blue iris. Moreover, also depends on the amount of pigment. The second layer, as we see, is the continuation of is the stroma, and this stroma is important because it contains two important muscles, sphincter pupillae and dilator pupillae, also nerves and vessels. The sphincter pupillae, being the cause of active meiosis, is uh, supplied by parasympathetic innervation, and our dilator pupillae being the one which causes active mydriasis located in the peripheral part of the stroma, is one which is responsible for which is supplied by a sympathetic innervation. The third layer is the anterior epithelial layer. Mind you, this anterior epithelial layer is the continuation of pigment epithelium. Means the pigment epithelium is forming anterior epithelial layer, and the final layer is posterior pigment epithelial layer, which is a derivative of non-pigment epithelium. Now this is to be remembered that a non-pigment epithelium is forming a pigment epithelium. So these are the layers of iris. So let's make it quick revision. There is a suprachoroidal lamina containing supraciliary lamina, then anterior limiting layer. Then we have stroma that continues. Then we have Bruch's membrane, a part of stroma. Then we have retinal pigment epithelium containing as ciliary body की pigment epithelium containing as anterior epithelial layer. Then we have a sensory retina which will be more over here, that continues as non-pigment epithelium of ciliary body, that continues as posterior pigment epithelium of iris. So these were the layers of uveal tract, anatomy of uveal tract. So let's go into some further detail of iris. Means this is the frontal view of the iris, microscopic view. We see there are two zones. The peripheral zone is the one which is known as ciliary zone, and the central pupillary zone is what is known as pupillary zone. There is a central hole in our iris that is known as pupil, and this pupil decides the amount of light that is entering our eye. So this differentiating point between our ciliary zone and pupillary zone is collarette. That is a pigmentary frill. It may not be that clear, but this is collarette. Okay. And in the peripheral zone, that is the ciliary zone, we have radial vessels that forms the radial elevation within the iris, and there are pits, central pits and peripheral pits. Now the cause of pit is that in the zones of pit, the anterior limiting layer is missing. So this is what we needed to know about the anatomy of the uveal tract. Thanks for watching.